Welcome back, everyone. We finally made it through all the class reveals in the new Hearthstone Perils in Paradise Hearthstone expansion, and I'm really excited to get into all of these cards because the cards from the classes are really what makes and breaks the expansion. Neutrals are cool and everything, individual cards cool and everything, but this will shape up how decks are supposed to play, new ways to play Hearthstone, and especially with the tours this time, we're going to have double access to all these cards. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can find here. And we're going to get started with the first class that has been revealed. And the first class that has been revealed is Mage. Mage cards, you have to keep in mind, can also be used by Druid. So when the Druid cards come out, we'll have a look at those cards a little bit again, but I'll hint about it a little bit here and there. Okay. Mage. The first card is King Tide. It's a 4-mana 4/4 a legendary minion. Battlecry, both players' spells cost 5 until the end of your next turn. Okay, this card's obviously amazing. I don't think I need to sell that this card is pretty sick. Most decks that I've ever played against in Hearthstone right now play really cheap spells. They don't play expensive spells. You're not helping your opponent with this. And even if you yourself play like not that many expensive spells, I think this can still be pretty sick. Just as a combo breaker to make your opponent like not be able to answer your board, or just like have your opponent be blocked from doing their crazy OTK, Druid, or whatever turn. I think this card's amazing. I'm not sure if this is enough to help Mage kind of out of the slump that it is in right now, because the only really playable archetype for Mage is Spell Mage, because the most powerful cards are Spell Mage cards, and obviously this is a minion. So this conflicts a little bit, but I think as a solo standalone card, this card's amazing, because all like crazy kill effects, all crazy combo effects, they rely on cheap spells. This obviously isn't Lothep. The big upside of Lothep as well, of course, was that your opponent they couldn't play a Brawl because it cost 10 mana, right? All the big removal spells that just couldn't be played. But I think this can also have a lot of upside. Some Mage spells are really expensive that you can discover, and getting like a Sunset Volley or Tsunami will be pretty amazing. So I think this card is really good. Then we have 4-mana 2/5 Paladin Taurus, so you have to put this card in your deck to have access to the Paladin cards, which we'll look into in the next video. After you cast a spell, summon a random 2-cost minion and give it Divine Shield. This card would be really nice if the Salesman would still give you a 0-mana Snake Oil, because then you'd finally have like a really good use for your Snake Oil other than like killing with Sif. Because like if you play this with 0-mana cards and you make a bunch of like 2-cost minions with Divine Shields, this is mega sticky. Like 2-cost Divine Shielded minions are really annoying to deal with. It's really annoying to clear these kind of cards. But as a 2/5, I really don't see this surviving much. And you're not going to build a deck around this because Mage doesn't really have the tools to like use like these 2-cost Divine Shielded minions to essentially leverage a winning game plan, right? That's not currently happening in Hearthstone. So I think you play this card mostly to get access to the Paladin cards, but I'm not sure if like tours can ever really be bad, because just having access to cards from another class should be pretty good in general. Then we have 8-mana Tsunami. Summon 3/6 water elementals. Good old water elemental, and they redid the art, which I have to say is amazing. It's really nice. You have like a water elemental with a shark that's chasing a fish inside of it. Really lovely stuff. It's a 4-mana 3/6 mage elemental, and you summon 3 of those, and as always they still freeze any target that deal damage to, and they immediately attack random enemies. If you remember, there used to be this card that was 8 mana. Freeze a target. It was just freeze a target and summon 2 3/6 elementals. I think this card's much better. I think that's pretty amazing. Like playing, for example, King Tide on turn 4, playing this on turn 5 gives you a lot of board. 3/6 water elementals that freeze are pretty crazy, and there are some decks that really hate being frozen, and if you Tsunami them, the game simply ends. Like, I think this card's really cool. I think this card's powerful, and I think there is a good chance that this will see some play in one way or another, with King.8 specifically as a combination. Like, there has to be some mana cheat to get this out, but even for 8 mana, I think this is a powerful spell. Like, even if you have to spend the actual 8 mana on the spell, it's good, right? And knowing that we can probably cheat this out makes me just the more excited for this card. Then we have 1 mana, go with the flow. Choose a minion. If it's an enemy, freeze it. If it's a friendly, give it spell damage +1. Freezing a minion for 1 mana is okay. But Mage already has better tools for this, and I think the upside of giving a friendly minion +1 spell damage really isn't this good. And I think a lot of the powerful stuff that Mage does to this point still is spell school related, and this card does not have a spell school. Yeah, Tsunami was a frost spell, but this does not have a spell school. And I think this is one of the minor details that makes this card unlikely to see any play, because the upside of being able to put it on a friendly minion I don't think is that big, but I think the downside of not having a spell school is quite large, because frost spells are not always super easy to come by when wanting to do something useful in your mage deck. And there's better ways of freezing an opponent. Alright, then we have 6 mana. It's called Under the Sea. It's another spell. It's draw a different spell, summon a random minion of that spell's cost. So for example, if I draw a Tsunami, I get a random 8 cost minion. So this kind of works in a deck where you play Sunset Volleys and Tsunamis. It's like really high cost expensive cards. You play King.8, and this is just another way to make sure that you really hit your expensive spells, and that you like you don't only play like, let's say, 2 Tsunamis, 2 Sunset Volleys. Sure, that's like 4 payoff cards for example, like King.8, but this makes it 2 additional payoff cards. So this is just to give your deck some consistency, and this will heavily rely on this specific archetype working, because it means you have to cut all this cheap spells from Mage. But we've had the big spell Mage that worked before. The key part of that, of course, was that Yogg Box was amazing because it could rescue a lot of game states. So we're going to have to see if there's other cards that can potentially rescue games kind of like this. And there's a 10 mana Paladin card that we'll get to soon that summons a lot of stats that could also work with this, because if you play the Taurus, you can also put this in your deck. Then we have 5 mana 5/6 Battlecry. The next spell you draw is cast when drawn. So it's a 5 mana 5/6 beast, and the next time you get a spell, you draw it from your deck, you just cast it. Of course, again, big spell synergy. If this would be together with Yogg Box, I would immediately put this in my deck. Like, I draw a Yogg Box, I get to like immediately play it. Especially if I get to tutor a Yogg Box, I'd immediately play it. We'll just have to see if the mage spells, they're not going to be quite Yogg Boxes again, but I think they'll be pretty good. Then next up we have 3 mana Rising Waves. Is another spell with no spell school. Deal 2 damage to all minions. If none die, deal 2 more. I think way too often 1 minion will die, but the stuff you want to kill doesn't die, and I think this card will be bad, and I'll be moving on from it. 3 mana 3/3. Your first spell each turn costs 2 less. So you can play this with a 2 mana spell. You get like a 3/3 for cheaper. But I don't think it's what you want to be doing with your turn. Even a 1 mana 3/3 is not something you want to be playing. The card dies way too often to get the upside in the next turn. So I don't think this card will be playable. Then we have 3 mana 3 charges. Tide Pools, it's a location. So 3 mana location with 3 charges. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less. After you cast a spell, reopen this. So this, for example, has a lot of uses. If you have cheap spells in your deck, you get to use this quite a lot. And you get to make the Giant, for example, that we saw that costs 10 mana and gets reduced by 2 every time you use a location, a lot cheaper. Because, I mean, you can discover cheap spells from this, use them, rediscover, cheap spell, use, and so on and so on. And even in a big spell archetype where you want like cheap spells to freeze your opponent, or just have cheap spells to remove your opponent's stuff, you'd probably want to use this location as well. It's a little bit on the greedy side, because You discover a spell and then you have to use it. It's not quite as good as the Nightcloak Sanctum that used to freeze your opponent, but being able to use this quite a lot of times might really be useful. It's a cool card, and I think this will be played in quite a lot of mage decks, just because discovering a spell is really it's synergetic. It's with the giant, it's really good with spell schools because you can discover what you don't have. It's really nice together with just cards that you want to already run 2 of in your deck, but you want to have more, so you want to discover more. So I think this card is pretty cool, and I think it should see play. And pretty much every spell-based mage deck, which is right now all of them. And then you have, last but not least, we have Sea Breeze Chalice, which is 1 mana, frost spell, deal 2 damage randomly spread among all enemies. And so this can, of course, go face, and this has 3 uses. So this is kind of like the bananas in Hunter. You can use this 3 times. And if this is an effect you actually want to play it, this is like 1 mana, deal 2 damage, draw a card. Which is... yeah, I mean, 1 mana, deal 2 damage is bad, but 1 mana, deal 2 damage, draw a card is pretty good. And this is somewhere in the middle. On top of it is a frost spell, which is pretty nice. And like I said, frost spells are not that easy to come by. Sometimes it's important for mage to ramp up their spell schools pretty quickly, so they can have a nice large AoE turn on turn 5 with the creation, which is the 5 mana 3/4 mech. That deals 1 damage to all enemy minions, and this one is upgraded every time you play a spell school. So this is a cheap frost spell school that you can play, and that does not rely on your opponent having like minions. You can just play it on 1, for example. It won't always kill what you want to kill, but with it having multiple uses, this might be quite nice. On top of this has of course some synergy because it can be used in Druid, because all mage cards can be used in Druid as well. This could be pretty cool for something like Owl Druid, right? Just multiple damage sources again. Maybe if you use the Tourist and you can replace some sort of damage source, so you can play this card multiple times. I'm a little bit skeptical because I think if I think about Owl Druid, you're a little bit capped on mana. You know, like you're capped out of how much mana you can use in a turn. So using 3 times damage for this card isn't amazing. And you'd rather have like Living Roots, which can always just 100% go face. But I think there's a chance that this card sees some play. But to me, really the highlights of Mage so far, the Tide Pools, 3 mana location that discovers a spell that costs 3 or less and opens every time you cast a spell. It's just so easy to reopen. Then I think the Tsunami that summons 3 water elementals that immediately attack opponents, and King Tide, the 4 mana 4/4 that makes both player spells cost 5 until the end of your next turn. Those are the absolute highlights. Looking forward to Big Spell Mage again. Not quite sure how it does in the current meta, but I think there's some powerful stuff there. And next time we're going to have a look at Paladin, and Paladin cards can also be used by Mage. So we'll see a little bit more what the synergy is if we put the Taurus into our deck. Thank you for watching. Always remember that you're valuable and you matter. And I'll see you in the next video.